is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have Tropical Storm Fernand that's currently out in the subtropical Atlantic right now. And then after that, we're going to have a little bit of a quiet period, but things are going to be ramping up again very, very soon in the tropics. We're looking at in the next week or so, things starting to ramp up once again. So enjoy this little quiet while it lasts, but then things are going to start ramping up, and we're going to start talking about that as well today. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into it right here. So starting off, what we have right here, we have Tropical Storm Fernand right here. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that right here. I said Ferdinand earlier. It's Fernand right here. So let's go ahead and get right into it right here. Here's your public advisory. Maximum sustained winds are 60 miles per hour. This is a strong tropical storm. Minimum central pressure is 1,000 millibars. It's currently moving at 13 miles per hour to the north-northeast. It's currently located in the subtropics east-northeast of Bermuda by 400 plus miles, and its tropical storm force wind field extends outward 80 miles from the center. So this is a system that's going to mainly stay out to sea. Not particularly too worried about it at this current point in time. Expected to be moving into some better, not better, but worse conditions and starting to weaken in the next couple of days or so. Let's go ahead and read the discussion very quickly and then look at the cone, and then we'll move on. Here's your discussion that we have for you right here. A large burst of persistent convection remains on the southeastern quadrant of Fernand, with 1 minute goes of 19 visible imagery suggesting that a low-level center is positioned on the northwestern edge of the burst. Scoutometer data indicates that the maximum winds have increased to 50 knots, which is 60 miles per hour, and that will be the initial intensity. Little change in strength is anticipated today, followed by a weakening commencing tomorrow due to reaching cooler waters and increasing shear at this current point. That's the general gist that we have with this. Expected to remain a 60-mile-per-hour storm and then start to weaken the next day or so. And then in the next 48 to 60 hours, we are looking at this becoming an extratropical cyclone and dissipating right here. So ultimately not the biggest concern that I have right here. Let's go ahead and show you the cone. Real quickly, expected to move far away from Bermuda, far away from Newfoundland, and then start to head towards potentially Europe and merge with a frontal boundary from what I've seen from the modeling. So that's pretty much what we have with Fernand, our sixth named storm right here. So that's kind of the general gist in the situation we're dealing with at this current time from the National Hurricane Center. That kind of area we were looking at last time I was talking about this kind of went up, down with the chances, and then it kind of just got killed off by the NHC. This morning, so we're not looking at much more development at this current point in time. However, we are looking at some pretty interesting stuff happening down the road. We have the Climate Prediction Center that we're going to pull up for you today. We're going to have a bunch of other metrics pulled up for you today, so you're definitely going to want to pay attention because the lull is not going to be nearly as long as it was earlier this season. And instead of maybe it being like 3 to 4 weeks, we're looking at maybe 5 to 7 days at most, and we'll go ahead and show you why that is. Starting off with the CPC right here, we did present this last week. They will be sending out an updated graph tomorrow or Wednesday, so we'll be staying tuned for that. But what we have going on for right here for this week, we are looking at about a 20% probability, a 20 to 40% probability, according to the CPC, of more development happening in the main development region. Over here south of the Cabo Verde Islands. We're going to definitely want to watch that, especially as that wave train continues to move off the coast of Africa right here. But this week I'm really interested in is the first week of September right here after Labor Day weekend, because you're looking at two discrete areas of tropical development. First, a massive area of potential tropical development happening across much of the main development region, potentially putting the Lesser Antilles in the line of fire right here. And the second big area is this area right here to the west, which is your Central American gyre setup. That's your classic setup right there. What the Central American gyre typically does is it's kind of a broad low-pressure area that produces a lot of convection that starts to fire up across either the Eastern Pacific or the Atlantic, or in even some rare instances in the Bay of Campeche right here. Hurricane Milton was actually an example of that, where it kind of organized in the Bay of Campeche and then just explosively intensified into a Category 5 hurricane. So that's kind of this type of scenario we're looking at. Helene is more your classic Central American gyre setup, where it kind of moves to the north and head towards the Gulf Coast right here. So we're definitely going to want to pay attention to that moving forward. But ultimately, it's this week right here that we're going to want to pay attention to, because the MJO charts are looking a lot more favorable, and we'll go ahead and show you those right about now. And then we'll look at some other metrics as well, such as the conditions like the water temperatures, the OHC, and all of that stuff. But let's go ahead and shift over to the Madden-Julian oscillation. So here's what we have for your MJO right here. This is updated as of right here. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at the situation that we're dealing with right here. This is, I believe, what we have for the modeling right here. Yeah, this is where it's currently at right now. It's currently over in the Indian Ocean. We're looking at the MJO returning towards the Atlantic and Africa over here. That's kind of been pretty consistent. Yes, it is relatively weak, but it's still somewhat consistent according to a lot of the runs. And what that ultimately is going to do is it's definitely going to at least have some sort of situation. What we'll deal with is kind of what it would kind of see an uptick rather of mesoscale convection, especially along the Western Atlantic, where things start to blow up. You have increased divergence and all of that stuff as well aloft, and increased convergence near the surface. That's going to help generate more convection, and you're definitely going to want to pay attention to that. It would be more favorable for a Central American gyre setup, and it would also potentially be more favorable for all the wave train that's going on in the main development region, and we'll go ahead and kind of give you a visual as to what that may be looking like. So here is what we have for you right here going on. Right here, we'll go ahead and start with the main development region. What you're noticing right here is you're noticing more tropical waves starting to kind of come off the coast of Africa right now. It's a little bit of a lull right now, but you have another big healthy wave coming off in the next couple of days or so. Another wave will be behind that shortly. You're definitely going to want to pay attention to this as well. I'm not 100% sure if that's going to get tagged or not, because I've been looking at the models. They're not really showing too much right now, but we'll have to pay attention to that going forward, because this season already has thrown a lot of curveballs. We had quite a bit of model underestimation with the first three named systems. We had model underestimation with Chantal, especially with this system becoming a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Then we had a Hurricane Aaron that just absolutely exploded to a Category 5 hurricane and just made it so difficult to forecast at that current point. So we're definitely going to want to watch this wave as well as the next one as well. But you're also going to want to watch what's going on in Central America as well, going in the Western Atlantic, this region right here. What the MJO typically does is it produces more convection across much of this region right here, particularly in Central America, sometimes in the Antilles as well, and that produces a potentially more favorable environment for tropical cyclones, because what you'll have is you'll have more convection, you'll give it more of an opportunity to acquire some vorticity, kind of build off of that, and then start to spin up and then really start to turn up once it drops a LLC, and then a mid-level circulation develops on top of that, and then off to the races we go. So that's kind of your situation we're looking at right here. If you are in Central America, if you are in the Gulf Coast, if you're in the Greater Antilles, you're definitely going to want to be on high alert with this, because once this lull is over, it's going to start going back to business, and this is probably not going to stop all the way until late October. Based on what I'm seeing, we're looking at a better environment going forward, especially in the long run. I know Weather Center Nazario is also picking up on this as well. I've been kind of talking to him about this too. Behind the scenes, we're trying to figure out, okay, what are the exact parameters we're looking at right here? We'll get more into that later down the road, but by and large, it's going to be a very wild next couple of months. And not only that, but we're also looking at the climatological peak of hurricane season as well. We're starting to really ramp up climatologically, and you have plenty of warm water and plenty of good conditions to really support that as well. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and show you the climate reanalyzer. Not the climate reanalyzer, but kind of what we have for the ENSO forecast, remaining to be negative neutral for you guys right here for the rest of the season. Although we are looking at potentially a chance of a La Nina happening towards the end of it, that would more likely affect wintertime precipitation in the United States, and that's something I'll talk more about later down the road. But if we do see a chart like this, you could definitely see more snow this winter from this as well for those living in the U.S., especially in the Midwest and those areas as well with this kind of chart. But we'll talk more about that as we get closer to that season. I just thought I'd highlight that as to another risk this poses. But this also allows for better potential for tropical cyclone development as well, because you're going to have weakening trade winds, you're going to have weakening wind shear, and you're still going to have plenty of warm water to deal with, obviously. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and show you that right now. Here are your water temperatures right here, ladies and gentlemen. My goodness, things are getting pretty interesting. Things are really ramping up. Yes, you do have that cold wake that Hurricane Aaron left behind, but that is quickly recovering right now. We're already back up to 29 degrees Celsius in a lot of these regions right here, especially where that became a Category 5 hurricane and then just started to move up and start to make that turn and really start to impact the Carolinas and those areas as well. That's going to take a little bit of time to recover, but already we're done with this by about a week or so, and this is already starting to recover very quickly. Also watching SSTs continuing to warm up in parts of the main development region, especially the western half of the MDR. That's a big concern of mine as well, so that you're going to want to pay attention to. And kind of like what we've noticed for a while, what we noticed with these waves that come off of Africa is they're not really that prone to develop right away. Aaron obviously was the exception. It really blew up and then just remained a 45-mile-per-hour tropical storm for quite some time. And then things really turned up once it head towards the Antilles. But what we saw with Fernand was pretty much it got tagged right away. It took time to organize and develop and then strengthen by the time it got towards the western MDR and by the time it got closer to the Antilles. That's the kind of situation that we're going to be dealing with for the rest of the season, most likely. At least because you have better conditions in the western half of the MDR than the eastern half of the MDR, and that's going to kind of lead to a few problems. I've talked about this quite a bit in a few of my videos, but if it's not like where you have 5 to 7 days like you did with Aaron or Hurricane Irma back in 2017, where this system developed right away and you had time to figure out, okay, this is already pretty interesting. How strong is it going to get? How can we prepare and do all of that stuff? And you had more time to kind of monitor and prepare and see what was happening, where maybe in the future you could see a scenario where ultimately the system just kind of takes its time to organize and develop until it gets to about I'd say 50 degrees west, and by that point you have 2 to 3 days left to prepare by the time this starts going, and then the rapid intensification possibility on top of that. That is a much scarier type of scenario, in my opinion, where you don't have as much time to prepare, especially when by the time it becomes a tropical depression, and then when it really blows up in intensity, it catches a lot of people off guard, and that's kind of my main concern looking at these water temperatures as well. Same with the ocean heat content as well. OHC has continued to explode across much of the western Atlantic right here. And what we're looking at right here, the Caribbean is very untapped, ladies and gentlemen. The Gulf, very untapped, ladies and gentlemen. The Bahamas area, very untapped. Parts of the Atlantic over here have been tapped into, but that is quickly recovering as we speak. This cold wake is not going to last forever. Right here, and then in parts of the MDR over here, that's still relatively untapped. Yes, it's definitely better than it was previously in some spots, but it's still a very big concern of mine right here, especially just close to the Lesser Antilles, where you're looking at up to 125 OHC. And then as you move further to the west, south of the Dominican Republic and Hispaniola, you're looking at an area of you're seeing 150 plus OHC, isolate spots over 175. Also watching the area in the northwestern Caribbean as well. That is a lot of 175 OHC right there. Same thing with the loop current and in the Western Gulf right here. The Western Gulf really turned up its OHC potential over there as well. So if a system's potentially organizing in the Bay of Campeche from that gyre setup, it's going to have a lot more favorable conditions to run through right there with the water temps and the OHC to deal with. And that is a very concerning area to watch as well. If you're especially in Mexico, if you're watching this from Texas as well, that's also poses a pretty big threat as well, in my opinion, especially if the system moves kind of more so towards the north compared to the east like Milton did. So we'll keep you updated on that. Now let's go ahead and show you the wind shear and the dry air patterns for this. The dry air patterns are definitely getting a lot more favorable for tropical development, but so is the wind shear. The wind shear has been the most favorable part at this current point in time right here. The wind shear continues to be pretty calm for much of the main development region going into late August and early September. You do have a little bit of a wind shear increase in parts of the Western MDR and Caribbean for a couple of days right here, but the Gulf starts to calm down a bit as well, and then you see these wind shear patterns getting a lot better for tropical development, especially as we get towards August 30th. And yeah, you still have some lingering wind shear over here, but that's really going to calm down by early September right here, and things are just going to go haywire potentially across much of the Atlantic right here. Starting around September 3rd, in my opinion, is when you're really going to want to watch, like, especially after Labor Day weekend, because the Caribbean becomes primed for development. The Atlantic gets primed for development in terms of shear. MDR continues to remain primed for development, although there is a little bit of wind shear to the north you're going to want to watch out for. And then in parts of the Gulf generally doesn't see that much wind shear. You're definitely starting to see the jet stream starting to pull a bit further to the south than what we saw earlier in July and August, but that's not going to really do that much to the Gulf, at least right away, so we'll have to pay attention to that as well. But by and large, you're still very much open for business, and you're still very primed for an active September, ladies and gentlemen, and as potentially an active October as well, like I mentioned earlier. Let's go ahead and show you the moisture component to all of this, and then I'll show you the moisture anomalies with this too. Here's your moisture component, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, there is some dry air across parts of the Atlantic that is going to kind of limit development, especially in the MDR, at least right away. But as you get to late August, you see a pretty big moisture surge going into this region right here. And then you see more moisture starting to develop in parts of the western and some of the western parts of the MDR as well. So you're going to have to pay attention to that as well. But then September 3rd was when moisture really starts to accelerate across much of the MDR and in parts of the Central American gyre as well. You're definitely going to see more of a moisture surge in parts of the Gulf and Caribbean over there down the road, so you're definitely going to have to pay attention to that as well. Let's go ahead and show you the moisture anomalies with this. It's still a much more moist than average environment right here, ladies and gentlemen, and that is something you're absolutely going to want to watch right here, because yes, there is some dry air right now, but this is more mixable dry air where enough convection can fire up and really mix out a lot of the dry air issues that tropical cyclones potentially can have. So that's something you're going to need to keep an eye on, especially if you're in the western half of the Atlantic, because yes, it may seem dry right now, but it's a more moist dry than what we've seen climatologically right here. And this is definitely more of a concern area right here. And this as well as the wind shear is why the CPC is tagging these two areas as potential areas of development by the time we get to Labor Day weekend and areas past that. So you're definitely going to want to watch out for this here on the for much of you in the Caribbean and much of the Gulf region, especially in the East Coast as well. You're going to want to watch out as well, because I'm personally not ruling out maybe another Aaron situation from happening, but maybe a little bit closer to land. It's going to depend on what the troughs and ridges do and all of that stuff, and we'll have to keep you updated on that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But by and large, the key takeaways are: be ready for a very active September. The tropics are going to wake up once again. Enjoy the lull while it lasts. Enjoy the week. Enjoy the nice weather while you can, because things are about to explode across much of the Atlantic, and we'll be watching all of that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. I was gone this weekend, I know. I was back up at my visiting up at my old school where I graduated from college, visiting some friends of mine and all of that stuff. I had a blast. I definitely needed it, especially after the streams from Hurricane Aaron and all that stuff. I need to take a little bit of a break. It's always important that you need to kind of understand your limits, and you need to take breaks when applicable, and that's kind of what we did here for a couple of days. And now I'm back. I'm here for the rest of the season, so get used to me, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys like me, if you don't, get used to me, because I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, or ask us some questions, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. We'd really like all the help we can get. It's been a wonderful project that Ethan and I have been working on the last couple of years. Same with T-Volt as well. He helped start the whole thing, and it's something that I'm really proud of, and I really appreciate everyone that's in there, and I hope you guys can get to join that too, because we have some very cool stuff planned, and we're excited to reveal it in the next few weeks. Well, with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.